Hello there, and welcome back to the, shall we say, the finale of this season of Harry Potter Abridged. We'll call it something like that. Uh, this is our last chapter in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Hello, this is Harry Potter Abridged. Um, yeah, that's what's happening right now. And so I'm excited to have finished this book after a delay in starting it, and then a delay after starting it, a very significant one at that, with a few sporadic episodes spread out, in there during that void. But I've been enjoying this little streak here, and I'm not going to I'm gonna like knock on some wood or something, and we are going to slide on into the Prisoner of Azkaban there. Yeah, it's gonna happen. Anyway, this is, as I said, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, chapter 18. And this chapter is called Dobby's Reward. And this is, I like this chapter. There's some, well, first of all, I mean, to keep it all the way real, obviously, the first two books at least end pretty neatly, with not a whole lot of leftover bad feelings overall or anything too strenuous or negative. It's fairly, like, people go through things, but nobody is lost. Everything is, there's dark points and dark plots and dark decisions even that take place during the book, but by this point everything's pretty much been tied up, and then what's left to be tied up is tied up in this final chapter. But it's still, like, without being too perfect feeling, even though it is, a nice, ending. So let's see. Let's let's dive in, shall we? So we ended the last chapter with Fawkes leading our troop of Harry, Ron, Ginny, and a completely not fully self-aware Lockhart, who doesn't know who he is because he wiped his own memory out with Ron's backfiring wand. So that's where we are, and they have followed Fawkes to McGonagall's office, and they had just knocked and entered, and so there they are, just standing there in the doorway, all like gross and kind of slimy, and Harry's got blood all over him from the basilisk, and everybody probably just looks, as they say, much the worse for wear. And so then Mrs. Weasley jumps up. It turns out she was sitting in front of the fire crying because she thought her daughter was dead. Which, again, like I said, there's some dark, kind of shit that goes on here, because, like, literally for at least, well, what did it end up being, like maybe 12 hours or something like that? Everybody thinks that Ginny's dead. Basically everybody. But especially her friends and family. Anyway, so Mrs. Weasley, like, jumps up and screams Ginny's name, and comes running over, and Mr. Weasley comes over too, and they both, obviously throw themselves on Ginny because they're like, holy shit, she's not dead. And I can't really even imagine what that would feel like, either extreme. but also, not only to in addition to the presence of the Weasleys' parents, Dumbledore is back, and he's in McGonagall's office also. So, yeah, he after he was sort of banished or whatever, suspended. That's what it was. Um, he is back, and we'll soon find out why he's back. Aside from dealing with this situation in general, but like other reasons why he came back. Anyway, and so Mrs. Weasley is just like beside herself because of course you would be, and she's like, you saved her. How did you do it? And of course, and then McGonagall's like, yeah, how the fuck did you do that? And so Harry has to like take a moment. He's like, all right, fine. So he goes over to the desk and he like puts all his shit down, which is like he kind of accumulated a bunch of things. So he's the sorting hat, the sword, and the diary, which is a nice little set of artifacts there. And so then Harry tells the entire story for nearly a quarter of an hour, which is a much better way of saying for almost 15 minutes he spoke. And so he tells them about hearing the voice, about how Hermione figured out the basilisk bit right before she was petrified, how he and Ron went into the forest, and the whole thing with the spiders, which had to be pretty terrifying to not only admit to, but to tell about. So I guess I forgot that I think that at the end of the Aragog chapter, I was saying that nobody was ever going to know about this, but wrong. They tell them right here about it. So, right. Anyway, okay, cool. So good to note on that. The bit about the pipes, just everything, about how we got to where we were. Aragog, what he learned from them. Moaning Myrtle, how they deduced that from what Aragog said about the bathroom. And so that's probably where the entrance was. And McGonagall's like, oh, okay. Never mind all the rules you've broken. Then how did you survive this encounter with a giant snake that can kill people with its sight? And so Harry's like, hang on, I need to hydrate. That's what he said. And then he went on from there to explain about everything that happened in the tunnel with Fawkes and the sorting hat and the sword. And then he's like, well, see, because he doesn't want to what's the word, incriminate Ginny, because he hasn't at this point he hasn't really had to explain about the diary, and so now it's kind of come to that, and so as a good thought, Harry looks over to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore's like, oh yes, my cue, right. And so he's like, what I want to know is how Lord Voldemort, which of course he just whips that out, because he's Dumbledore. I mean, Harry does it too, but I know like over half the people in the room probably just went. Anyway, he wants to know how Voldemort enchanted or possessed Ginny. And because he's like, as far as I know, he's still in the forests of Albadia. And Harry's like, okay, I don't have to explain any of that now. Excellent. And so the Weasleys are like, what? because, like, you know, obviously the idea of Voldemort possessing Ginny is terrifying, basically. You know, not to put too fine a point on it. And they're like, but is she hasn't, has she, no, we can't even finish this sentence. And Harry's like, it was the diary. It was Riddle. He made it when he was 16. And Dumbledore, after Harry says that, Dumbledore picks it up, and looks at it, and, like, apparently one would assume that, again, assuming that the Horcrux story had in part or in full been devised at this point in the writing, this is the moment when Dumbledore starts to perhaps suspect a bit more about what this diary actually was, because of its powers and such. Because, I mean, that's the explanation he gives in well, later. Anyway, so Dumbledore's like, brilliant. And Dumbledore goes on to call Riddle probably the most brilliant student Hogwarts has ever seen. And because we know, like, that Dumbledore has a fairly, he might loathe himself about certain things, but when it comes to his intelligence, he's very candid about feeling very intelligent and maybe even wise. More so the intelligent bit, though. Anyway, so for him to call Tom Riddle the most brilliant student that ever came through Hogwarts, it's kind of insane. But it explains how he could become what he became. So yeah, anyway. So so then Dumbledore goes on to explain the bit about how Voldemort used to be Tom Riddle, because nobody else knows that. Or not. He says very few people know that, because it's when he reemerged as Voldemort, he'd been away from the country for quite some time, and he didn't necessarily look like the Tom Riddle that everybody that went to school with him would remember anyway. So a lot of people never, like, connected those dots, which is, you know, makes sense, because not all of the people who ended up being Death Eaters went to school with Riddle. In fact, a lot of them are younger than him. Anyway, and Dumbledore's like, yeah, I taught him myself. 50 years ago at Hogwarts, disappeared after leaving the school, travel, dark arts, dangerous transformations. And yeah, he basically says what I was just saying. He was barely recognizable. And so most people, if they didn't have some way of knowing ahead of time, they had no idea that this was the same person. And Mrs. Weasley's like, that's very illuminating and all, Dumbledore, but my daughter, you bitch. No, that's later. Like, how, what? And so Ginny finally is like, it was the diary. I wrote in the diary. Things happened with the diary. It wasn't good. And Mr. Weasley hits her with one of those, like, sage Mr. Weasley bits of advice. Haven't I taught you? Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. Which is, you know, mostly applicable. There's a certain map that this is not applied to, but hey, the map's cool. Anyway, and of course Mr. Weasley's like, why didn't you show it to me? And, you know, she's like, I didn't know. I found it inside of a school book, which, you know, there's that moment, I'm sure everybody probably remembers, but just as a refresher and a throwback, there's that moment in Flourish and Blotts. Well, Harry's going to call him out on it here in a minute. That's fine. We'll come back to it. It's in the book. I don't have to actually pre tell you about something that's coming right up. Right. So, but anyway, so Ginny kind of goes on to explain a little bit more about it, and then, anyway, so yeah, and so Dumbledore's like, just, take Miss Weasley over to the hospital wing. There's no punishment. Nobody's in trouble. What did he say? Older and wiser wizards have been hoodwinked by Lord Voldemort, which is very true. And, Ginny really didn't know what she was getting herself into. She was just writing in a diary. And she's super young, too. So it had to be kind of fascinating. So, yeah, and he sends her off with the recommendation for bed rest and perhaps some hot chocolate. Because, it's always a good option. Although, depending on your lactose situation, you got to be careful about how you make that hot chocolate. It can be, it can leave you not feeling as good as you start off feeling. I'm just saying. It's good, though. Tastes delicious. And Dumbledore also drops hints that when they get there, that they'll be meeting all the people or seeing all the people who were petrified waking up, because the mandrake juice is the blood of the mandrake is ready for them to drink. I'm sorry, ever since I really started thinking about the mandrake thing, it really does kind of grosses me out. They shouldn't look like Cabbage Patch Kids if they're gonna get cut up and turned into juice. I'm sorry. Maybe I really should have looked this up, because I'm you know what? Fuck it. Wait. It's the last episode in the book. Let's see if we can find out something real quick. I don't know, my keyboard's not loud or anything. Okay. Well, actually, as it turns out, the precise subject that I'm attempting to address is in fact an article on Pottermore that appears to be specifically about the movie side of it, because what it says, and it's also a behind the scenes mandrakes is the name of the article. It's a behind the scenes article. And the first, the lead line, the tagline, whatever the fuck you call it, it says, how do you create something which resembles a baby, but whose main purpose is to eventually be destroyed to cure petrification and not invoke horror? Make the creatures look as unlovable as possible, of course. And I see here that that's exactly what they did. I honestly had forgotten, because I haven't seen the movie in so long. It looks it is humanoid in that sense, but it's they did as much as they could to make it ugly looking. Without it doesn't look evil, but it just doesn't look nice, and so so that, but it also looks more like a root. It doesn't look like a Cabbage Patch Kid. That's how I imagined it from the description that I thought I read. But who knows? I know they changed it for the movie anyway. I'm sure to make it again uglier, because it was going to have to be cut up and stewed. So I don't know, that this was a very interesting choice by Rowling in the first place to make it like that. It's to use that imagery, I mean to say, and to even give them more human-like traits, like the fact that they're like, like mating up and like, moving into each other's pots and shit like that. Like, it's like, damn, that's yeah. Anyway, yeah. Let's see here. Back on the tracks. So anyway, so Dumbledore recommends these things and sends the Weasleys out, except for Ron, of course. And so Ginny can be relieved finally too, because like that's the thing. Everybody kind of gets their like their bit of justice or whatever, like Ginny's not punished and she's just sent to go rest and feel better. And she's off the hook on like getting, like I said, you're right. Anyway, and then like, well, let's continue. We'll get to them in their turn. And so Dumbledore's like, turns to McGonagall and he's like, I think this calls for a feast, because of course he does. I do like that about Dumbledore. He's keen to celebrate whenever the occasion seems appropriate, and I appreciate that. So he sends McGonagall off to go alert the kitchens. Dumbledore's really good at clearing a room. He can like just be like, I need you to go do this and see this person and then this person and then double back and go over to this place, go over here, and then meet me in the Great Hall. And he could do that like 5 times to like with different instructions to each person, and then be like alone with one person left. And so here we go. So she's off. So that's one down again after the 3 Weasleys left. And McGonagall's like, I'll leave you to deal with Potter and Weasley. Dumbledore's like, certainly, because, it's Dumbledore. But Harry's like, wait, deal with? What, deal with? That, you know what I've been through? So Dumbledore's like, of course he can read the look on their faces of like, oh shit, what now? And he's like, yeah, remember I told you I was gonna have to expel you if you pull any more shit like this? Well, you saved the day, so I'm gonna have to eat that and take a little egg on the face, and give you both like 200 points apiece for Gryffindor, and both you'll get special awards for services to the school, just like Tom Riddle did. He doesn't say that, but obviously. And Ron's all blushing and shit because he's Ron, and then Dumbledore's like, but one of us is keeping awfully quiet. And yeah, Lockhart's standing back there, and he's like, what about you? And Harry's like, oh shit, right, Lockhart's there, because he's just like back in the corner, like just hanging out, bemused and befuddled and whatnot. So, and so Ron has to explain, like, there was an accident in the Chamber of Secrets. And he's like, Professor Lockhart. And Lockhart's like, am I a professor? And he's like, I expect I was hopeless, wasn't I? Which is pretty great. His stupefied brain is smarter than his whatever. Anyway, at least more honest. Anyway, I guess. Anyway, and Dumbledore's like, falling on your own sword there, buddy. And Lockhart makes a stupid comment about the sword because there's one there. And so Dumbledore's then like, Ron, if you would take Lockhart up to the hospital wing, that will leave me with Harry so we can have our final denouement, expositional, end of the book talk. And so that's what happens. Ron leaves with FKA Lockhart. And they sit. And Harry's still feeling nervous. Like he just, there was a... it's got to feel like when this is the end of your second year and you've gone on another, like, adventure miles under the school. Like... It's got to be like, oh man, this is who I am, huh? Like, am I gonna always be like in the office at the end of the year? Like, you gotta wonder. And again, it's not like it's not like Harry's doing it on a dare, like he really would have much rather not followed the spiders, and of course not as much as Ron, but still, he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go into the Chamber of Secrets. Like, there's this thing that comes up later, and I don't really mind mentioning it now, because if I'm still doing Harry Potter Abridged when we get to it in the later books, it'll be worth bringing up again then, because it'll be far enough down the road. Anyway, there's mention later of Harry having, like, this saving people thing, but it's like, he's the one that's in the best position to do something, and also has the interest and the knowledge. Like, maybe he's not the most qualified, but he's the one who cares about his friends and about the situations enough, and is entangled in them because of fucking Voldemort and his increased level of involvement from book to book, that it's like the alternative for him seems like cowardly, and he's in Gryffindor, and they don't play that shit. So it's not in his character to not do the thing that needs to be done when it comes down to it like this, even though it's not something he would seek out. He does like to do adventures. Like, he likes the detective work shit. They all do. All three of them do. There's no doubt about that. But the things that they end up having to risk, which includes their lives, already at this age, that's no small thing to choose to do. It's easy as a child to use the fact that you're a fucking child as an excuse not to do something like that. Like, you expect the adults to do things most of the time when it gets to a certain point of like either skill or intensity or danger or whatever. But there's situations where they don't feel like there's anybody that's gonna, take them seriously, and they figured shit out. Anyway, right, you've read the books. Anyway, so Dumbledore's like, well, first of all, Harry, gotta thank you, because you had to show real loyalty to get Fawkes to show up. And so this brings me back to what I said a chapter or two ago, or whenever it was, about how I feel like there was something like, there's something about Fawkes himself that has like this, I don't really understand it exactly. And I know it's the loyalty to Dumbledore that somehow called him. Maybe if you say his name, there's like a trace put on you. I don't know. But either way, what I was gonna say is, I don't know if it's just that, or like I just wonder about the wand. I mean, Dumbledore says that it's, he says specifically that you must have shown me real loyalty, because he says nothing but that would have called Fawkes to you. So I guess nothing but is kind of absolute, and Dumbledore might not always tell the whole truth, but he doesn't make a habit of lying. So all right, we'll stay with that. And so Dumbledore, of course, is now like, so, you met Tom Riddle. And it's like, Dumbledore obviously knows a lot of what there is to know about young Tom Riddle, because he was a teacher. I mean, and he's, also, he talks to a lot of people, as many people as he can, although there's not a ton. But still, well, I don't know how much homework he's done at this point, but he's definitely getting started, I think, at the very least. I mean, because he knows who he is. I mean, he knows that he grows to be Voldemort, so the more he can find out about his past, the more he can figure out about who he actually is. So, and what he's done. What he's done. Right. And so he's like, and soon as Dumbledore brings him up, Harry's like, oh, so this thing, he said that we were like alike and stuff, strange likenesses, and Dumbledore's like, huh, did he? Well. And he's like, what do you think? And Harry's like, I don't think I'm like him, because of course that's what you're gonna say, because he's the bad guy, and you see yourself anyway as the good guy. I mean, in this case, Harry pretty much is a good guy. So, but he's like, I don't think I'm like him, and he's like, I'm in Gryffindor. I'm all right. The Sorting Hat. God damn it. And so he confesses, finally, to someone the thing about the Sorting Hat. He's never told anyone to this point. I mean, granted, this is like a year and a half later, yeah, give or take a little, maybe a little closer to a year and 2/3 later, something like that. Anyway, and so he's like, yeah, the Sorting Hat told me that I would have done well in Slytherin. And then he's like, everyone thought I was Slytherin's heir because of Parseltongue. And then Dumbledore's like, well, thing about the Parseltongue is that the reason why you can speak it is because Voldemort can speak it. And he's like, and Harry's just kind of like, and Dumbledore's like, yeah, pretty sure that when this whole Scar incident happened, that Voldemort, as he said, transferred some of his own powers to you. That night. And he says it's not something he intended to do. And so now this would be a statement that potentially would support the theory that the Horcruxes hadn't been written as a plot line yet when this writing was taking place. But maybe there's a separation. I mean, that's powers. But then Harry clarifies it by saying Voldemort put a bit of himself in me, and Dumbledore says it certainly seems so. Which, of course, Harry takes to mean, I should be in Slytherin then. And he's like, the Sorting Hat could see Slytherin's power in me, and it, Dumbledore, of course, finishes the sentence, put you in Gryffindor. And so that's when Dumbledore gives his little speech about, where's the summary of it? Oh, and I have to mention this too. Dumbledore's like, there's these reasons why the hat would have seen that you might have been a Slytherin, because you have the Parseltongue, you have resourcefulness, determination, disregard for rules, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yet the Sorting Hat placed you in Gryffindor. You know why that was. Test time, Harry. Pop quiz. Why? And he's like, and Harry's, he does something like this at least a couple of, maybe it's just one other time, but maybe more than once after this, when talking to Dumbledore, because I don't know, it's meant to sort of like show his I guess his naivety, and to allow Dumbledore to sort of like deliver the message. And he's like, well, you'd only put me in Gryffindor because I asked not to be in Slytherin. And Dumbledore's like, yes, fucking exactly. Ding, 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 ding. You are the winner. And he's like, that makes you completely different from Tom Riddle. And we get the crucial, probably like the line of the whole fucking book, which is, it is our choices, Harry, that show who we truly are, far more than our abilities. which, pretty good thing to work from. And so Harry's like, oh, okay. So the thing that I've been like fearing and like thinking about myself all this time, it's like kind of the opposite. Like because it's not that the hat put me where I wanted to be, despite what it was best. It put me there because that's what I wanted, and that makes me whatever different. Anyway, so he's like kind of absorbing all those thoughts, and he's like, if you want more proof, Harry, how about take a look at this here sword that you pulled out of the sorting hat. And sure enough, on the hilt, just below the hilt, he sees engraved the name Godric Gryffindor. And of course he uses the phrase, only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that one out of the hat. Anyway, it's just like the magicians pulling things out of hats. It's like a play on like real world illusionists that aren't actually magicians, right? Anyway, so they just sit there because this is another thing that I think is kind of great, and it's like one of the. At least it's only, maybe it happens with other characters, but it seems like with Harry and Dumbledore, they have more like pseudo comfortable silences together than like any other characters. Like they talk about some shit and they both sit there and kind of like digest it, and then one of them interrupts the other and they talk about some more shit, and then they sit in silence again for a little while. It's like, I don't know, it's very like it teaches Harry how to be like more respectful in discourse, although admittedly Harry's temper is pretty ridiculous. Even though like he totally has, like, I shouldn't even say pretty ridiculous, because like in truth be told, like the shit that he goes through, like later, there's so much reason to be angry. Anyway, let's not get too far ahead just yet. So anyway, after that, dun 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 dun. So yeah, then Dumbledore kind of like puts an end to the talk by grabbing some ink and a quill and some paper, parchment, whatever, and starts to get ready to draft an advert for the Daily Prophet, and to also, of course, write. He says write to Azkaban to get Hagrid back, but I'm like, wouldn't you write to the Ministry? Like, are there ministry wizards like on site at Azkaban too? Maybe. Anyway, it is interesting how much power Dumbledore is able to wield sometimes outside of the law, like just because of who he is, and like when he's got proof of something, it's like his word is like. Anyway, well, but then then the Goblet of Fire happens. Anyway, whatever. Later. So, so he tells Harry to go down to the feast, and then get some rest, because obviously rest is the most important thing after you almost lose your life. And that's actually probably true. After the food. Oh, right, but then so as Harry's leaving, right as he gets to the door like bangs open and bounced off the wall, and Lucius Malfoy, dun dun dun, comes in, and then behind him, wrapped heavily in bandages, it says, is Dobby. And I think, yeah, we didn't know who Dobby belonged to before this. This is, yeah, because, yeah, Dobby's name is in italics. Like, the whole point is this is the first time Harry actually finds out who Dobby lives with, because he just calls them his masters, or his master, or whatever. So anyway, so Dobby comes in, and Dumbledore's like, "Good evening," and Malfoy is like, he's in a towering temper. It doesn't say that, but that's what he is. He's all like, "So, you've come back, have you?" And stuff like that. And Dumbledore's like, "Well, see, what had happened is you were doing some blackmail type shit and threatening to curse people, and once everybody found out that Arthur Weasley's daughter had been killed, they wrote to me and said they wanted me back immediately. So I'm back, bitch." And so, yeah, and so Dumbledore, like, kind of, dangles out the little bits of the stories that he was told, so that Malfoy can know that he better, like, cool his shit, because he could be in trouble. And it turns out he's going to be in a bit of trouble. And so he's like, "So did you stop the attacks? Did you get the culprit?" And Dumbledore's like, "Yep, we did that. Duh." And he's like, "Well," and Dumbledore's like, "You know who it was. It's the same person it was last time. But this time, this diary was involved." And he holds it up, and he's watching Malfoy closely. But Harry, on the other hand, is watching Dobby. And Dobby is trying to do a little mime clue. He's playing a bit of charades, as it were. Or, what the fuck is the other version of that? Like, it's like that, but it's like when you have a word up on a screen, not on a screen, you write the blanks for the word, and whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Somebody will put it in the comments. Anyway, but Dobby is, what he's doing is that he's pointing at the diary, then he's pointing at Lucius Malfoy, and then he's hitting himself on the head with his fist, because he's punishing himself every time he tells Harry non-verbally what he's trying to tell him. Because that's kind of, quite sadly, how Dobby's mind works under the I guess it's almost like a binding spell or something that to bind, like just, they can do these things, but like the instinct to injure themselves or to punish themselves in some way is extremely, like, hard to resist. And so anyway, so Dobby's like doing that kind of on loop. And Malfoy's like, I see. And Dumbledore's like, yeah, if Harry here hadn't, with his friend Ron, discovered this book, well, Ginny might have taken all the blame. And basically he's like, yeah, you this could have gone real badly for you, and for the Weasleys. And he's very sarcastic with him. He's like, and imagine how that would have affected Arthur Weasley and his Muggle Protection Act if his own daughter was discovered attacking and killing Muggleborns. And so he's like, yeah, it's very fortunate the diary was discovered and the memories were wiped from it. Because he's like, who knows what the consequences might have been. Yeah. So anyway, he Dumbledore is not above a bit of taunting. And Malfoy's like, yeah, that's very, very fortunate indeed. So, and so Dobby's still doing his mime, pointing at the diary, then to Malfoy, and then punching himself in the head. And finally, it clicks in Harry's head, and he's like, okay, got it. Nods at him, and Dobby finally, like, fucking stops his little loop, and now he's twisting his ears. Oh, Dobby. Anyway, and so Harry jumps into the conversation, and he's like, don't you want to know how Ginny got that diary, Mr. Malfoy? And Malfoy's like, how should I know? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you know, because you were the asshole that gave it to her. You put it in her Transfiguration book when you picked it up at Flourish and Blotch. You slipped it inside, didn't you? And he's like, prove it. And Dumbledore's like, yeah, well, nobody's going to be able to do that, but just know that we know, bitch. Anyway, so Dumbledore kind of like threatens him a little bit, like don't be giving out any more of Voldemort's old school shit. And he even threatens him with Arthur Weasley, like tracing it back to him. He really stands up for the Weasleys here, which I think is fucking fantastic. And so Malfoy's like, well, all right, everything I came here for is completely fucked, so we're out. Let's go, Dobby. And poor Dobby comes over to the door, and just as he gets up there, Malfoy fucking kicks him out the door, because he's a horrible, horrible human being. And yeah, so, and Harry, in a moment of inspiration, comes up with a quick little plan, and it's a beautiful little plan. And he's like, Dumbledore, can I give that that diary back to Mr. Malfoy? I got something up my sleeve. And Dumbledore's like, yes, of course, but don't forget the feast, Harry. Keep your priorities straight, son. No, you're just gonna go try to free your house elf and all, but don't forget the food. Maybe he doesn't know. He's pretty smart though. Odds are that he figured it out by the time Harry got where he was going, if he didn't realize it at the beginning. Anyway, so Harry grabs the diary, dashes out of the office, heads towards the sound of Dobby's squeals of pain receding. He takes off one of his shoes, pulls off his filthy sock, stuffs the diary into it, runs down the corridor. And then, as he rounds a corner, there's Malfoy. And he's like, Mr. Malfoy, I got something for you. And he runs up to him, and he basically puts the sock covered diary straight into his hands. Like, he doesn't, smartly actually, he doesn't give him the option of whether he's gonna take what he's gonna give him or not. He's like, here, take this. And Malfoy's like, what the? He pulls. Interestingly, he doesn't just drop it or throw the whole thing away. He actually is able to even though the whole thing had to be a bit of a shock because Harry just ran up out of nowhere. Although I guess you probably could have heard the feet of a kid running down the hall, but still. Anyway, he actually recognizes that it's the diary inside of the sock, so he pulls the sock off, all disgusted and shit, tosses it to the side, and he's like, And he's like, you'll meet the same sticky end as your parents one of these days, Harry Potter. Because everybody likes to tell Harry that he'll meet the same sticky end as his parents one day, Harry Potter. I mean, seriously, well, at least the Malfoys do. I feel like Bellatrix might, and I think Voldemort himself pretty much does. So yeah, it's a go-to phrase. Anyway, so after Malfoy does a little insulting, he turns to go again and calls Dobby, and Dobby doesn't come. And he calls him again, and Dobby does not move. And he's holding the sock. And we remember that Dobby said very specifically the family is careful to never give Dobby even as much as a sock. That might not be exactly the phrasing, but the word sock is in that sentence. I am certain of that much. And so, just as much as a sock has landed in his hands, first being in the hands of his master, and even though the sock did not belong directly to the master, it was given to him by Harry, willingly, quite willingly, and therefore the charm of the enslavement of Dobby has been broken. And what's kind of great about this chapter, or well, about this scene, I didn't mean to say at the end of this chapter here, is that, well, it's not at the very end, but anyway, that Dobby, well, not just Dobby. House elves have some pretty fucking stellar magic to not have wands. Like they can apparate at places that humans can't, which is useful. Um, and then they seem to have like really strong protective charms, which kind of makes sense in the fact that they've been like they have a role of servitude, so like protecting their masters as much as serving them could come in handy sometime, I suppose. I don't know if that's really what they're called on for or not, but they just seem to have like, because what happens. Let me continue. I do get ahead of myself. Anyway, and so Dobby's like, Master has given Dobby a sock. Master gave it to Dobby. And Malfoy's like, wait, what? Oh, God damn it. You fooled me with the fucking sock, and I tossed it, and the fucking house elf caught it, and now I don't have my servant. And he goes for Harry, and that's when Dobby's like, you shall not harm Harry Potter. Which is kind of like one of the best moments in the whole fucking story. And like he does some kind of like defensive spell, and like Malfoy gets knocked off his feet and actually like bounces down the stairs 3 at a time to land on the next landing, and that's fucking great. Anyway, and he pulls out his wand after he gets up from falling, and fucking Dobby's like, you shall go, and like that's like he's like, you're not gonna touch Harry Potter, you're getting the fuck out of here, go. And Malfoy doesn't try any more shit. Like he just goes. Like he must know something about whatever it is that house elves can do. I don't know. Like I said, it's an interesting kind of thing with them. But anyway, so yeah, and so of course Dobby is like beside himself because he is the one house elf in the world that actually wants to be free, and he's been freed. And I mean it's a good one because man, like the Malfoys are horrible to him, horrible. I mean, people aren't great to house elves anyway, but this was an extreme case. So anyway, and Dobby's like, oh no, it's hey, it's all good. I got you, Dobby. You just do one solid, bro. Like never ever try to save my life again, and we are good, mate. Even Steven. And Harry's like, okay, so one thing. When you popped into the hospital wing after the fucking bludger, like I asked you and you said it was not he who must not be named, and Dobby's like, oh, now Harry Potter, it was a clue. And the explanation, which is a legit explanation, but damn it, it's one you just wouldn't have necessarily guessed that Dobby was going to like throw out there. He's like, well, he who must not be named before he changed his name could be named. Therefore, it was not he who could not be named. You know what the fuck I'm saying. It was a double negative. Therefore, it was somebody. Anyway, he was trying to say that it would tell him it was Tom Riddle, but he didn't know who the fuck Tom Riddle was for a while, so it wasn't the best clue. But so Harry's like, cool. So Harry's like, all right, I gotta go. But Dobby gives him a big fat hug, and Harry, Harry really likes Dobby. He cares about him much, as well he should. So Dobby just disapparates to who the fuck knows where, because he doesn't have a home to go to right now, but he's out and he's happy. And so they have the feast, and it's like a pajama party feast, which is kind of amazing. Like it's like a big fat slumber party for the whole castle. Which does sound like the most comfortable feast ever. And it ends with like so many like it's like one of those like not a montage, but just like one of those scenes like they put at the end of movies where like a good thing happens and another good thing happens and another good thing happens and another. It's like oh my god, that's all the good stuff happening back to back to back. And that's what happened. And, seeing Hermione and her being like, you solved it, and all that good shit. And then Justin Finch Fletchley apologizing and being all, like, nice and shit. And Hagrid coming back up at 3:30. So these motherfuckers were up all night partying, and the teachers were cool with it. I love it. It's a bit of a dodgy place at times, but it's pretty fucking great. And then she always puts like if you aren't really thinking about it, like, you won't see how much physical comedy she puts into Hagrid's interactions with the trio, but it's like almost every time he does anything, like, there's something, like, if he touches them at all, like, their knees buckle or their faces bang into shit, like, or they, like, almost fall over. And he's not even trying, but he's like, here he gets there, like, late at night, and he cuffs Harry and Ron so hard on the shoulders that they were knocked into their plates of trifle. Like, and it's done in such a, like, inconsequential way, because it doesn't really change anything. It's not like he's trying to hurt them or hit them or anything like that. He's just half giant. Anyway, but it's like, it's easy to almost miss it if you're not paying attention, because it's just like, yep, that's Hagrid. That's what he does. Anyway, and then of course, Harry and Ron's 400 combined points secures Gryffindor's House Cup for the second year running. And then McGonagall tells them that the exams are canceled. I mean, it's just like, it's an all-night fucking party, for real. And Dumbledore announces that Lockhart's going to have to go away to St. Mungo's to get his memory back. And even some of the teachers clapped for this one. And Ron, in typical Ron fashion, is like, oh, he was just starting to grow on me. Because that's what happens. Ron, like, doesn't like somebody and then they grow on him. Except for Harry. Like, he was pretty much good with Harry all the way around. But, I mean, Hermione very much had to grow on him. And then there was the troll incident. But anyway. So the rest of the summer term passes. There's lots of sunshine because it's summer and they're in England, and Hogwarts is back to normal, which is, it's interesting. Like they sort of timed it where, like, there's not much time left, but there's a little bit of time left. Like, so it's, even though it is basically the end of the school year, there's like this weird, like, just like little time where everything's just like normal again for a little while before we reset the story in the next book. But anyway, so they still have classes, but they don't have Defense Against the Dark Arts because Lockhart. And Ron's like, we've had plenty of practice with that anyway. We're so cool. Oh, yes, and Lucius Malfoy, they find out, has been sacked as a school governor, so Draco's not strutting his stuff anymore. He's kind of being all... And on the flip side, in our Ginny Weasley update, she is back to being perfectly happy again, because she didn't get in trouble, and she recognizes that the things that happened weren't her fault, really, and the actual things that happened weren't her fault at all. She probably should have been smarter about the diary, but whatever. It could have happened to anybody. And that's true. I mean, maybe not anybody, but plenty of people. Anyway, and so before too long, though, I mean, it's only, I don't know if it says exactly how much time is left, probably like a week or two at the most. And since the exams were canceled, which was like a nice, now that I think about it, a very convenient plot thing to do too, is to not have to like create like any other like after tension after the main one's resolved, because it would just feel like a little too, like, just like, why is this even here? Like, the story's over, right? And so it kind of is they're like, oh, now it's time to get on the Hogwarts Express, and they're, on their way back, and all of them get a compartment together, and so they're doing magic and playing Exploding Snap and setting off the filibuster fireworks for the last of George's, which I'm like, how would he not get more before the end of the year? But whatever. Because this is pre-wizarding Weasley's Wizarding Wheezes, whatever the fuck. The triple W's. But they probably order them through the Daily Prophet too. And they were practicing the disarming charm, which Harry was getting very good at. It's noted, because hello, that's his thing. And they're almost back when Harry remembers, and this is this is such a rolling thing to do. Like after everything, like here's like this one little random anecdote that's just or thing that's just kind of funny. A little loose end that's just like tying it up. It just adds a little laugh. Anyway, and so Harry's like, Ginny, what did you see Percy doing? And she's like, oh, well, Percy's got a girlfriend, which this is the first time we actually hear it, even though I've been talking about it already, but this is the first time that we find out for sure. And then it's like looking back that you're able to see what was going on. But so anyway, she walked in on them kissing, and that's who he was writing to last summer, and that's why he's been sneaking around the school. So Percy's like, like kind of like it makes him a little bit more of a hypocrite than because I mean usually you think of him being like the big rule follower. I mean I guess he wasn't necessarily, depending on whether he had free time or not, he might not have been breaking rules outright. It depends. It really all depends. But nonetheless, he was definitely sneaking around the school to kiss his girlfriend. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just think it's funny because it's Percy. And Jenny's like, you won't tease him, will you? And Fred's like, no, of course not. What are you talking about? And George is like, no. Same thing that he said. I'm the other guy. I have to admit that this book did not make me feel a ton of the separation between Fred and George. I'm trying. I mean, I do notice that Fred speaks first more often. That I have gathered. And it's like a lot of time that means that he sort of leads the joke, and George is able to sort of like just knock it home, because they have like magic twin powers or something. Anyway, so they get to the end of the ride home, and he writes down his phone number for Ron and Hermione, which leads to hilarious consequences later, and. And he tells Ron that, like, he told Mr. Weasley how to use a phone, so he's like, call me. He's like, I can't stand, being there 2 months without talking to anybody else. And it is kind of funny because, like, 2 months is a long time in real life, no doubt about it, but when you're 12, 2 months is a fucking eternity. Like, especially when you don't have, like, school or anything else to, like, really occupy you. So it's like every minute, every hour just like can drag. So yeah, anyway. And Hermione's like, won't your aunt and uncle be proud? And he's like, what? All those times I could have died and I didn't? They'll be pissed. That's what he says. It's in the uncut edition. And so, yeah, after that joke, all those times I could have died and I didn't manage it. And together they walked back through the gateway to the Muggle world. The end. We take this thing off the thing and do the book closing noise like that. That's not even really as good as a real book closing noise, but that's as best we can get with a Kindle. And so there it is. Let's see here. It was suggested that I might try and do a book summary here, or just give my thoughts on the book on the whole, or something. I did not, however, prepare notes. I got to the point where I just wanted to get in and do the episode while I had the energy to do it. So now I'm trying to think. It's interesting, like, going into it, I was, like, kind of feeling like, this is just going to be, like, the first book all over again. I mean, and then in some ways it kind of is, but like I don't know, like there's still enough things in this book, and I feel like Ron does. Of course I can't remember everything right now, but I feel like Ron has a bigger role in this book than he did in the previous. Although he did technically was the one who knocked out the troll, but it wasn't the most skilled thing he's ever done. It just was, the right thing at the right time, which is very important as it turns out. Anyway, what else? Well, obviously it's interesting because even though we go into the school again and we see Voldemort again, but we see him as a teenager, so we're getting like this view of a character that we get to know more and more as an adult, as time goes on. But we're getting to see, we see his childhood again later, 2 parts of it, but this is like just an imprint of like who he was and how he thought as a 16-year-old, I believe we decided it was. So that's interesting in and of itself, to sort of like get some of the origin of like, oh, he was using the name at school with his friends. He was, well, then the whole thing with Hagrid, obviously. I think that's a pretty compelling storyline, regardless of the fact that it's so unfair. But maybe that's part of what makes it so compelling. It's not like everything turned out okay for Hagrid. It did in the broader sense of like he still got a job, he still got happiness and friends and a lot of things, but he still was done wrong, and he never had those wrongs truly righted. Dumbledore did the best he could by repairing his wand and hiding it for him in that umbrella, but anyway, so that in and of itself, the Aragog scene obviously is kind of like the book equivalent of like the scene you put in a movie, which obviously this specific scene became that scene in this movie. That and the car scene where you just like go wild with the special effects and like make it exciting and interesting just mostly for the spectacle. Granted, don't get me wrong, the scene with Aragog with the actual talking did give away some very important, well, not give away, but it supplied some important information that was key in solving the riddle, the puzzle, the riddle. I didn't even do that on purpose. Anyway, but it's true. But the stuff with the car and like the way they're rescued. It's fun, is what it is. So anyway. So we have that. And the car scene is kind of crazy. The movie version's way crazier. Harry's like hanging outside. The car turns all sideways and shit, and Harry's hanging on by a thread basically off the door, and Ron has to grab him and get him back in, and it's insanity. But it was a fun scene too, though. Like that's sort of the point. Like there's the scenes, and a lot of the scenes that are fun in these books lean more towards, especially in the earlier ones anyway, more towards just like being fun for fun's sake. But then there's also like implications to it, like because at the end of the day, like them flying the car, even though it was like an ill-made decision, it was based off of a thing that happened that had nothing to do with them, which was the sealing of the barrier by Dobby. So anyway, so yeah, there's like, and that's another thing with the Dobby story is an interesting one. We meet him at the beginning of this book. He mysteriously is warning Harry not to go back to school. We don't know why. And, and none of that's solved until the end. But in the meantime, like we realize that Dobby's like, even though he's doing a horrible job of managing this situation, he really, really does care about Harry and what he represents, and then he gets to know him and finds that he likes him even better than what he thought he would based off of his reputation, which is pretty fantastic too. So anyway, and so then Harry is able to return the favor by freeing him at the end of this book, and so I don't know, I like that little arc in and of itself, and I like the way it ends, and I like how Dobby protects Harry from Lucius Malfoy at the end. I think it really sets up their loyalty really well for each other, and makes later events, well, you know. Anyway, let's see. Okay, that's probably enough unless I think of anything else. But let's go look at comments and see if there's anything that because I feel like there is one or two that I wanted to address. Well, Diana thanked me for the regular installments, and you're welcome because, you know, I'm like I said, I'm going to ride this wave as long as I can because I'm having fun, and yeah, that's, yeah, that. And Katie Joseph, you'll correct me. Says, is it just me, or do you feel like 50 years is too long? Because that makes Hagrid and Voldemort like 65. And in a way, yes, but fortunately, for the sake of like the story, we have two things going for us in that situation. No, first of all, the first one, nobody else is really in that age group in the story, fortunately. Like the Weasley parents are like younger. I mean, not younger, older, right? Older? Yeah. I think so. And then Dumbledore's way older, and then like the you know, Harry, James, and Sirius gang are considerably younger. Like not like, but the younger, and like none of them, nobody else is from that era at Hogwarts when both Tom Riddle and Hagrid were there in the story, far as I can tell. Which does make, by the way, for a really interesting dynamic when you think about the fact that Hagrid knows who he is, and so like this stuff, it's personal for Hagrid. You know, like we forget sometimes that it's not just that he is loyal to Dumbledore, like a lot of characters are, for very good reason, because Dumbledore takes in like the broken boys, you know, and gives them a place to rehabilitate and stuff like that. It's not just boys, but I'm just the character examples kind of are. But anyway, what was I getting at with? So two things. Since they are the only two characters that we have to reference from that, they are different from normal humans. One, because Hagrid is a half giant, and so I think that like contributes to him. Like maybe it gives him a longer life. I don't really know, but it definitely it makes him like tougher than the average human. So it makes me wonder if like maybe that's why he doesn't look old or like old, but like doesn't look like he's getting old or anything like that. Like it's never described that he has any gray hair or anything like that. And usually by 65, some people usually have it. Some people have full gray. Some people at least have some. Few have none at that age. But again, Hagrid's not normal. Voldemort, on the other hand, is, well, obviously at the beginning of the story, he's vapor, basically, and just like a disembodied spirit. But when he gets his body back later, it's not like a normal body. And even at the end of this book, in the chapter I was just reading, Dumbledore says like that he performed like numerous magical transformations to himself. And so he is human, obviously, still. He is still a man, or perhaps, potentially, anyway. Who knows? He could be a eunuch for all we know. Well, I guess if I, like, no, I really don't, forgive me, I don't want to say this sentence, but I'm going to say it anyway. If the cursed child is canon, then Voldemort has functioning anatomy. It wasn't the last part that I was dreading saying. It was the part about if the cursed child is canon. Okay, I'm not going to say it ever again. Anyway, what the fuck, man? There was a point. Oh yeah, so the point is that Voldemort wouldn't look his age anyway. Is my entire point. He doesn't even have hair, I don't think, at this point, like anywhere. Like, you know, so I mean, he's just, it works for him to be a little bit older because it gives him like the potential to have like, even though he's been gone for like 10 years, he was already like over 40 when he disappeared. Isn't that right? Or maybe just under. Wait a minute. If this, oh, Jesus Christ. Whatever. I'm not going to do the math right now. Bottom line, it's a good point to make, like especially when you look at it in light of like Ralph Fiennes playing him in the movies. Like he looks like he's in his like late 40s or early 50s, but I think that ultimately Voldemort doesn't look like he is any age. You know, he just looks like a really fucking strange, like almost like something out of like X-Men or the Marvel universe, like just like a unreal like looking villain. This is how I imagine him. Like it's similar to what they did in the movies, but like more extreme and like what they would almost require CG to do these days, as opposed to makeup and prosthesis as they used in the movies, which I think is more practical. But it's still the look wouldn't be. Well, who knows? Whatever. That's not important. It's done. Yeah. So that's my answer to that, is that I feel what you're saying, but I think that it's plausible is all I'm getting at. Thomas is binging. Thank you, Thomas. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. And I think that's it on that front. I don't think I have anything else to say about the book or the chapter. If it comes to me at the beginning of the next one, which it probably won't, but whatever. Yeah, and I was gonna do something clever to lead into the next book. That's not happening right now either. The point is that we did this episode, and look, even though this chapter is short, the episode's turning out to be kind of long. Well, we Swiftoids like Swifters, we like long episodes, right? I hope so. Anyway, yeah, and it's episode 35, and we finished Chamber of Secrets. We're on to Prisoner of Azkaban. We will see you very soon, I expect, indeed. So, enjoy the rest of your day part, and we'll see you soon. Peace.